All right, let's take a quick break from talking about Juan Soto and talk about another free agent, a pitcher.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As always, I'm Braden Iwasco. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Braden5Iwasco, Carter First 2 as well, on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Blue Jays. If you're new here on YouTube or you're listening anywhere else, we'd appreciate it if you guys drop the subscription. Helps us out. And it keeps us at the top of your page. If there's any live streams, any shorts, any extra videos, anything like that, it'll be on the YouTube. Trying to make it like the hub if there's anything extra. So make sure you go and click the subscribe button on there, Locked On Blue Jays on YouTube as well. We have the Discord channel up and available. If you guys want to talk Blue Jays with us whenever you want, you can join that and chat with us whenever. As well, we are doing Movember. I know it doesn't look like it right now, but everything's just coming in because we're still children apparently. So in saying that, go make sure you guys donate. Again, we're halfway through the month here. We're going to get into it, sort of coming up in the next today, and then it's sort of in for the future as well. So we do whatever you can, donate whatever you can. It's really appreciated. We can't say enough. So in saying all of that, let's sort of get into the meat and potatoes here. We're going to talk about Max Fried. He's a free agent. The Blue Jays are looking into him. Obviously, I think there's been a lot of sort of commotion around his name, which I think is a little strange, but me and Carter will get into that. And then Carter found out something. He mentioned this yesterday. I called it on the side there on today's show, pitching for the future, because I don't know. Maybe it's pitching for the past. I don't know where this is going to go. We're going to chat about it in the third segment. It's about the longevity and being able to pitch longer, more games consistently without worrying about injury. So we'll talk about that. Pitching is a big thing for us, with the amount of pitching injuries that have happened this season. So we'll get into maybe a possibility of relief there. I don't know. We'll talk about it. In saying that, Carter, let's get right into Max Fried. I know he was a guy that was, I don't want to say on your bingo card, but a guy that was on your radar for sure.
He's one of the best free agent pitchers out there, one of the best free agent starting pitchers out there. And he's been one of the best pitchers in the league over the last 5 seasons. Lowest ERA among pitchers over those last 5 seasons. He was an NL Cy Young finalist in 2022, won a World Series with the Braves. So that's always nice to see a little bit of that playoff experience, knows how to win a championship. And there has been a ton of reports linking the Toronto Blue Jays to Max Fried, and a lot of them actually saying that they are the favorites to land Max Fried, which is kind of interesting with how many other players they're in on, and just obviously the positional value as well there. Bleacher Report, Sporting News, Ben Nicholson-Smith are just a few that have linked Max Fried to the Toronto Blue Jays. Again, this guy is a very good pitcher. He has a 3.07 ERA over his 8 big league seasons. He has been 51% better than the average pitcher over those last 5 seasons. So really, there isn't a skill issue with Max Fried. He is going to be probably the top pitcher, at least compete with Kevin Gausman to be the top pitcher in the starting rotation. A lefty, so we're losing Yusei Kikuchi, get another left-handed pitcher back. It's always nice to have one of those in your dugout, in your bullpen, in your starting pitching rotation, you name it, because when you get to the playoffs, which the Toronto Blue Jays aspirations are to be a playoff team, if you have some better matchups with Max Fried, it's always something they'll be able to explore. But it's an interesting situation with all the Juan Soto talk that there's also a link to Max Fried as well.
Yeah, and we'll get into sort of how the fit would be sort of in the second segment, and do the Toronto Blue Jays need a starting pitcher? But I mean, you're right, Carter. The stats speak for themselves. I mean, he's a 2-time All-Star, World Series winner, Silver Slugger, and a 3-time Gold Glove winner. So Max Fried has done it all. He is, he's gotten every achievement you can possibly get as a pitcher, and looking to move forward. He, I don't know. I don't know why necessarily the Toronto Blue Jays are top of the ticket for Max Fried, but that's where we are. He's a guy that's going to bring a lot to this starting rotation. if that was the case. Like Carter said, there's Kevin Gausman, there's Jose Berrios, there's Chris Bassitt, and then you got some, interchangeable pieces barring injuries with Alek Manoah, the great start the great end of the season that Bowden Francis had. So yes, he would fit perfectly in, Carter. And I think the one thing that stands out to me for him is the fact that he didn't have his quote unquote best season last year. It was his one of his higher ERAs. But I think over that, I think when a guy doesn't have his best season and is still above and beyond most other pitchers in the league, I think that's a great sign. So there's not that fluctuation that I think we do see from a lot of pitchers and that we can see from some of the pitchers on the Toronto Blue Jays. So in this sense, yeah, it's a perfect fit. I think the Blue Jays need that one guy that's just stable all the time, because really, as good as Kevin Gausman is, he even goes through those up and down spouts. I think Max Fried really doesn't. You know exactly what you're getting from him almost every single time he's on the mound.
Yeah, you said Max Fried was a Silver Slugger, unless he's Shohei Ohtani. You obviously meant Gold Glove, 3-time Gold Glove winner, rather than Silver Slugger.
Oh, did I say Silver Slugger?
I wanted to let you finish your thought because you were talking about some good stuff. But Max Fried, unfortunately, not going to be a Silver Slugger for the Toronto Blue Jays. But he's one of the best pitchers on the market. Like I said, he's been one of the best pitchers in the league over the last 5 seasons, honestly, over his entire career. Again, having a left-handed pitcher with Kikuchi leaving is a nice thing to have. But the weird thing about Max Fried is he's a reverse splits guy. He's a lot better against the right-handed hitters rather than lefties. His slash line against righties is 200, average 266 OBP, then a 273 slugging percentage. And then against lefties, it's 321 average, 395 OBP, and a 464 slugging, which is kind of crazy. Again, with the traditional, you would think left-handed pitchers would be better against left-handed hitters, but not exactly for Max Fried. Another bonus for Max Fried is he is a ground ball pitcher. He gets a ton of ground balls, 59.2% ground ball rate. That's in the 96th percentile. You can't hit home runs. You can't give up home runs if the ball is never traveling in the air. So that's always a positive for your pitchers. And again, with the experience with the Atlanta Braves, with his pedigree, with what he brings to the table, get very good pitch mix. Again, kind of a wonky delivery a little bit from Fried. It would be nice for the Toronto Blue Jays to have. Like we said, we can never have enough pitching. But with Max Fried, it'll be interesting to see what his market's like and kind of what the contract will be at the end of the day when he is paid.
Carter, I thought I was an idiot. For a second there. I had Silver Slugger written down on my sheet. Turns out, yeah, he's a Silver Slugger winner. He was the final pitcher to ever win a Silver Slugger award in 2022. The use of the designated hitter was permanently allowed in both leagues, and the Silver Slugger award for pitchers was retired. Max Fried was the final pitcher to win a Silver Slugger award in 2021. So, okay, good that at least my mind wasn't going and I was writing stuff on my pad when I was doing sort of the research for the episode. I try to go in and get everybody's stats and whatever else, and I didn't even think about it. And then I started reading, and there we go. Apparently I'm not as dumb as sometimes I look. So funny thing there, but you're exactly right. I think Max Fried brings a different element that a lot of batters don't necessarily know, right? You'd think the righties would be so good against them would do so well. And it's just not the case. And so when you have a guy that's so versatile like that, it's going to drive up his bargain. And we'll get into the contract piece of this right away. But I think he's one of the guys and the guy this offseason that is in this free agency that teams are going to be bidding for. I mean, I think he's going to earn his bag. I mean, Carter, just going back to last season with his contract, it was a 1-year, $15 million deal. And I think it's going to above and beyond exceed that, just with everything that Max Fried brings to the mound.
Yeah, I mean, with the Silver Slugger, again, I'm not really following, unfortunately, Max Fried's hitting stats, but with how bad the Toronto Blue Jays offense was, who knows? Maybe you get Max Fried as a DH in one of those spots. This guy, he's unbelievable at the end of the day. The only issue that I have with Max Fried is the injury concerns. This guy isn't the most healthy guy of all time. Just going over his games played over the last few seasons. We'll start at 2018. He had 14 in 2018, 33 in 2019. That's interesting. So he must have came in for a bullpen start at some point. Then he had 11 in 2020, 28 in 2021, 30 in 2022. That was his all-star season. 14, unfortunately, in 2023. And then another all-star season in 2024 with 29 games played. And a good comparison for me with Max Fried is he's sort of similar to Jose Berrios. Doesn't have a lot of strikeouts. He's not a big strikeout pitcher, and 8.6 Ks per nine. But again, gets a lot of soft contact. I already brought up the ground balls. Ground balls is exactly what you want from Toronto Blue Jays pitching, from any pitcher, honestly, in the league. Induces double plays. You kind of let your defense help you out a little bit more rather than giving up the long ball. But again, when we look at those reverse splits as well, luckily for Max Fried, a lot of the hitters in the MLB are right-handed compared to left-handed. We look at the Toronto Blue Jays. They've been struggling over the last 5 seasons to get a good left-handed hitter. We've been talking about that on this podcast. Obviously, before the podcast, we were talking about that a ton. Now we have Spencer Horwitz. That's one. Other than that, we don't really have another left-handed hitter unless Juan Soto obviously comes to the Toronto Blue Jays. But I guess let's just get right into the contract talks and what the contract could look like if Max Fried does decide to sign with the Toronto Blue Jays. So I know I had 2 contracts. You found one as well. So again, it's all projected. So it's rumored. Again, I guess you could say the rumor mill is swirling again for those contracts. But what I found is I had one, or actually multiple, that said 6 years at 160 million, which would be 26.7 million over 6 years. And then I saw another one, 6 years at 156 million. And then I know you had one as well.
Yeah, the max one that I found, and I tried to look on both ends of the spectrum. You know, what's the least that people think he's going to go for? What's the most? And the most it turned out was 170 over that 6-year time span, Carter. And again, what's he worth? And we go back to a little bit our conversation yesterday of, you know, some guys set the market. Well, this free agency, Max Fried is the guy who's going to set that market. What is he worth? It's going to pretty much determine, I feel like, what everybody else is worth going in through the offseason. Nobody's going to, if you're going to overpay for somebody, it's going to be Max Fried. Now, my biggest problem here, Carter, with talking about contracts and Max Fried starting pitching and all that is, can the Blue Jays afford to pay somebody over $21 million for a starting pitching role this year? With what we talked about was, if they didn't want to break that, what's it called?
Luxury tax.
Thank you. Luxury tax. Then they only have $50 million to spend. So 24 of that, say, we'll call it 24, say it's 24. 24 of that going to a starting pitcher doesn't leave them a lot of room to work. That's my biggest concern here. I think Max Fried is what he is, and he's going to get the money he deserves. The question is, it always comes back to, what are the Blue Jays willing to spend? And I don't necessarily believe that they're going to be willing to spend $25 million on a starting pitcher.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Again, I think they're probably going to be all in on Juan Soto. I think that's from the reports we've seen, we talked about on the last episode. I guess if you guys are looking at Toronto Blue Jays media, that's pretty much all that anyone is talking about. So I think this year, compared to last year, they actually do have a backup plan. And I feel like Max Fried might be a part of that backup plan. But we're going to have to see. We've talked about on the podcast what the positional needs are. We haven't really talked a lot about starting pitching. So it's interesting that the Toronto Blue Jays seem to be so in on Max Fried. So we're going to talk about the implications that is going to have on the Toronto Blue Jays if they do sign Max Fried. Will that impact other positional needs? Will that impact free agency? We'll get into all that after this short break. Today's episode is sponsored by Select Quote. The World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can get you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. In sports, winning is everything. If you aren't winning, you're at least trying to set yourself up for the future, so you can actually win that big trophy, whatever it is. With Select Quote, you can get the best of both worlds. You can save now while protecting your family's legacy and their financial future. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less. With Select Quote, licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. So right now, you can get life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/locked-on. That is selectquote.com/locked-on. Go to selectquote.com/locked-on today to get started.
So, Carter, we talked contracts, we talked his stats, what he brings to the table, but what does he bring to the table for the Toronto Blue Jays? That's the big question. What is the purpose of a starting pitcher. I'll let you start because I feel like we have different perspectives on this a little bit. So I'll let you go. Say what you got to say because I'm going to come back hitting hard.
All right. So initially, the first reaction is like, why would the Toronto Blue Jays be in on a starting pitcher? And that makes absolutely no sense. When you look at the offense, you look at the bullpen. If you had anything going for you for the Toronto Blue Jays, again, the starting pitching wasn't necessarily amazing last season, but it was the best thing you had going down the stretch. You look at Max Fried again. He's got 7 pitches. Like, that's obviously he's going to be a very good pitcher. I think that's not really up for debate here. You're going to have to pay for this guy. It's going to be over $20 million, and he's probably going to be one of your best pitchers on the team. I guess a reason why they could be in on Max Fried, obviously that you can never have too many pitchers. There's some injuries. There's some things like that can obviously happen that you don't really account for in the season. And also when you look at these contracts with the Toronto Blue Jays starting pitchers, Chris Bassitt, in my opinion, not going to sign back on a 1-year deal. Kevin Gausman's going to be gone in 2 years. Again, when you look at Ricky Tiedemann, when you look at Trey Savage, Jake Bloss, if you sign Max Fried, if it's a bridge deal, if it's a 6-7 year, again, you can kind of bolster that top of the end of your starting rotation. But it kind of just helps you transfer from, I guess, the old to the new, you can say. It helps you get younger, and you just be a structured piece that you could have in the bullpen. Another reason why signing Max Fried could work for the Toronto Blue Jays is there's a guy that we signed last season who had a lot of success actually when he did work in the bullpen, and that is Yariel Rodriguez. Struggled a little bit with the starting pitching. Again, if he stretched out, he could be your long reliever. Again, injuries happen. Yariel Rodriguez would be a very good candidate to come in. I would have no problems if he is your number 5 guy. Had a 1.7 ERA in Japan in 2022. The strikeout numbers went up when he was in the bullpen. So that could be another reason that they would go to starting pitching. If they don't necessarily like some of the bullpen arms out there, they don't want to pay this much for bullpen arms. You have Yariel Rodriguez on a deal for multiple years that you could go to the bullpen if you do need to.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a ridiculous take. I sort of expect you to come a little bit hotter on the pro side, but I'm not going to say I don't understand the move because I do. You laid out some points that make sense. You know where you can use Yariel Rodriguez. You're praying that Bowden Francis keep it up and be that quality piece, but you don't know what's going to happen with him. He's still a young guy. You saw the resurgence from him. The question is, can he keep that going? And that's a great question, and I think the Blue Jays want an answer. And, of course, you're going to get Alek Manoah back. And, again, another guy that you don't necessarily know what he's going to bring to the table when he gets back. So I do sort of understand this. And I don't hate the transitional aspect that you said where you sign him and then you have all these younger guys coming up and they're going to need a guy like Max Fried is like a mentor, as a piece to model games after. So I do also understand that. But I think in the context of talking about this coming year, I just don't understand, for one, where they find the money. Number two, if this is the avenue they're going to go, that probably takes another bat out of the lineup. I always talked about the Gleyber and Santander duo. That would be my ideal 2 pieces, I think. Outside, obviously, if you get Juan Soto, that's unbelievable. But a more realistic duo, that would be them. And I think that takes away from then one of those guys. And you can, like or hate Santander, Gleyber, whatever. But the 2 pieces there is what I'm meaning. 2 extra solid bats. And that's, to me, what the Blue Jays need. Are their hits? Are their bats? Are their home runs? And to bring in another pitcher when you've seen that this starting rotation is not the issue, I think is just a little bit crazy and a little bit the game style here, Carter, right? You talked about it. Max Fried isn't a huge strikeout guy. They're going to have to rely on defense. And I think if we've seen one thing from this Toronto Blue Jays team is that their infield defense is poor. It is very poor. As good as the outfield is, you're going to add a left fielder who is most likely going to be a bat. It's not going to be a defensive piece. So again, you're sacrificing some defense. And then again, if you bring in a guy like Gleyber Torres, again, the infield struggles. So if you're getting a guy that doesn't pitch for a lot of strikeouts and pitches for contact, as good as Max Fried is, he's probably not allowing too many hard hit balls, but he hits. That's his style of pitching. And so I think bringing in that to a poor defense, I don't know. Again, it's just like it's not a huge thing for me, but it's an add-on piece to all the things I mentioned prior, in the sense that I just don't believe that this is the best idea for this Toronto Blue Jays team, trying to make a big stamp in free agency to gain the resurgence back into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think you can't discredit that at all. If you look at the positional leads on this team, it's not starting pitching. I think you'd be idiotic to at least not consider that in your analysis when you're looking at Max Fried. With the infield too, with like kind of the defense, I feel like a lot of times you have a little bit more flexibility in the infield. Like they'll make a bad play and somehow be scored as a base hit. If you miss a ball in the outfield, it's just you miss the ball. That's kind of there's not really a lot of room for error over there with that. Just regarding Max Fried, again, like you make a good point. If you pay this guy, it's going to have to be over $20 million. You'd have to be pretty okay with what you have offensively. And the offense did look better throughout the second half of the season. I guess you can add Orelvis Martinez to that, but is that necessarily turning a needle? You're really relying on the young guys to help out. And Ross Atkins, we've talked about on this podcast, win now, win now, win now. Max Fried does help you win now, but is he going to help you win now more than a guy like Alex Bregman? I'm starting to talk myself out of the Anthony Santander. I think he's George Springer 2.0, but Gleyber Torres at second base, I wouldn't mind that. Again, there's multiple players on the market that you can get to bolster the offense. And I think that's just way more of a positional need than a starting pitching would be. While there is some good things about Max Fried and him signing there, obviously you can look at it down the road. But with how much Ross Atkins has been saying, I want to win now, I want to compete right now, adding a starting pitcher doesn't make a lot of sense compared to some of the other guys you could add in free agency.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to is what makes the most sense with the funds you have available right now. And I just don't know for now. Maybe if this was 2 years down the road, I might be in a different position. But right now, this team so desperately needs power bats or solid bats, I'll say, because I don't want to, I don't want to say power bats and then Ross Atkins lose his mind. But solid bats, I just don't know that right now is the best time to be pulling the trigger. I feel like they're in 2 years, there's still going to be guys on the market that you could probably go out and get and be that role that Max Fried would have played to those young guys and into this rotation. I don't think you have to jump on this because this is the first big free agent pitcher available. I think you can just dial it back a little bit. We don't have to be the team that's throwing offers into absolutely everybody for no reason. I think you still have to have a coordinated attack in free agency. It doesn't necessarily have to be an overall all-out blitz on every free agent. I think you still need a plan. And if the plan is throw money at everybody, I'm concerned for this free agency.
Well, we can kind of talk this out here. Say Max Fried relatively gets $25 million. We've said, again, projected relative. Again, non-tenders can happen. There's a bunch of things that can happen with some contracts, arbitration, you name it. But there'd be about $25 million left for the next season. That gives you an opportunity to either sign 2 maybe league average bats or 1 above league average bat. And another thing not looking good as much for, if we've obviously said the positional needs are more so needed at third base, second base, and left field. When we look at just who Ross Atkins has paid on the Toronto Blue Jays, held out for Vladdy, hasn't paid him. Held out for Bichette. He has paid George Springer, but has paid Jose Berrios 7 years, $131 million. Kevin Gausman 5 years, $110 million. It almost feels like Ross Atkins is more inclined to pay starting pitching than he is to take a chance, I guess, on the traditional power hitter, you name it, just anyone that can drive in runs. So in that sense, again, we could have the greatest pitching of all time. If you're going to score 1 run in 2 playoff games, I'm not going to have any good feelings by the end of the year.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's frustrating. It's not even fun baseball to watch. I hate to say that because I was a pitcher and it was, you want to be the guy that shuts the door, but also, you got the fans sitting waiting for the long ball and nothing happens. I don't know, right? They're trying to sell tickets. Well, a home run hitter would definitely help you sell some tickets. In saying that, Carter, I know we've sort of went back and forth in this a little bit, but I do want to save some time, get into it. This pitching for the future of pitching. Will it happen? We'll talk about all of that when we come back from this short break. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need all in one place to place live bets on the NFL. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more in the same place, on the same page where you place your bets. I'm telling you guys, I've said this a ton. Take advantage of those bonus bets. It's like free money because you could throw them on. You can try your luck on the big parlays and maybe hit something big, or you just throw one on something small, win the money, and then it's yours. Then it's pretty much free money gifted to you. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Carter, I'm gonna let you jump into this. You came across this video, and it got us thinking a little bit. I think it stemmed from the fact I can't remember when it was. We were talking about Shohei Ohtani and the fact that, well, he can't pitch every day. And then Carter's like, well, maybe eventually he can pitch every day. So why don't you jump right into it and let us know what's going on here?
Yeah, so I'll start it with this. I got a stat here. And by the end of last year, 31 of the 64 hardest throwing pitchers based on StatCast metrics ended up having Tommy John last season. So as we've been seeing, Tommy John is becoming an increasingly bigger problem because everyone's chasing after the velo. They just want to throw hard. Doesn't really matter what cost, their elbow health, their shoulder health, you name it. They're just chasing after the velocity because that gives you, again, bigger margin for error. It makes a lot of sense. But when you look at a guy like Mike Marshall, and that's the guy I couldn't remember the name of in the last episode, so I did my research a little bit on this guy in 1974. So this is a little bit while back. Obviously, these guys probably aren't throwing 100, or they're not. I'll say it right now. They weren't throwing 100. This guy pitched 106 games in 1974. And his theory behind it is just to switch the throwing motion. And it's pretty hard to describe what he wants to do as a fix for some of these injuries. He kind of wants to turn his pinky like up almost and like really flare his elbow kind of up in like a circle when you look at the video. If you look up Mike Marshall new throwing motion, probably be a better depiction of what he's actually going for. But yeah, he says that it helps spin rate. It helps a lot of things, doesn't help velocity. But he says the reason for this is, I thought it was kind of funny. So the reason for this, the velocity hasn't been up there, is because he hasn't worked with good enough athletes that throw this velocity. Seems like a little bit of a cop-out answer, but yeah, who knows? This guy, well, again, 106 games in 1974. You get Shohei Ohtani, you get Max Fried maybe pitching 106 games. I think the Toronto Blue Jays would probably win a lot of their games. Again, at this point, you're probably not going to have anyone pitch 106 games, even no matter what they say. They say their elbow's feeling like $1 million. I don't think a lot of managers would be too inclined to do that, but it was just funny to see that this guy is trying to start a new throwing motion and just kind of cross-referencing what the league, I guess, maybe could turn into. This Tommy John surgery stuff does end up being a bigger problem than it actually is.
Don't get me wrong. Tommy John and the effect that it's having on the league, I think, is a huge concern for baseball. You don't want your star players going down, and I think baseball's starting to turn their heads and sort of start wondering what's going on here. Why? How do we stop it? How do we help it? Everything like that. But every few years, Carter, something like this comes out. If it's hockey, if it's baseball, if it's basketball, somebody always thinks that there's a better way. And I think at the end of the day, what's going to happen is some guy is going to try this because he thinks it works. He's going to get absolutely nuked because he's throwing 88 from the mound and just straight down the middle. And the other part of this that concerns me, Carter, is on your extra pitches. So on your fastball and your changeup, I understand this arm position. The other part of it is when you're throwing a curveball, when you're throwing a slider, how does this work? I just feel like it won't. So are we going to see two pitchers in a fastball and a changeup because that's all these guys can throw without now blowing their arms off? I don't know. I feel like this is a cop-out. Cool video. I think it's an interesting thought process on a way to avoid the Tommy John. I don't hate this in the sense of that. I think people need to start doing some looking into ways to prevent the Tommy John. And if it is just not chasing the velo, or if it is this different arm motion, different arm action, whatever it is, I think it's a cool idea and a cool thought process at least.
Well, just looking at the trends, Tommy John's getting worse and worse every single year. And it's not because of the rest. I think managers are doing better than they ever have in resting their pitchers. It just is the velocity. And I'm not saying that this is going to be the fix, but at the end of the day, if you're not trying something new, it's just going to continue on the same trend. So maybe, again, not the worst thing ever to at least do some research on this and see like how it can develop. But to end this episode off, again, it's going to be November 15th, the day that this comes out. So we're in the middle of November. Or Movember. And I just wanted to talk about some things that you could do to support. So obviously we do have our link in the description. All proceeds are going to men's mental health, the suicide awareness, everything that is supported with Movember. But what you can do, we're growing a mustache, obviously, or at least we're trying to. I don't know how well it's going necessarily, but we're trying our best. The thing that I was talking about when we first talked about this is the Move for Mental Health. I'm trying to walk or run Again, I'm throwing bike in there as well. I got a stationary bike actually behind me for the people on YouTube. I'm trying to use that. 60 kilometers for the 60 men lost to suicide each hour around the world. Those numbers are absolutely insane. It's terrible that even one person per hour is committing suicide. So anything you can do to help. Obviously, there's things that you can do that aren't just financially based as well, whether it's posting on social media, whether it's starting a competition at work, whether it's, again, even just going for a walk and maybe just telling a friend about Movember, things like that. There's so many things you can do for Movember, and it's such an important cause in men's mental health and just our society right now. So we really encourage you guys to help out in any way you can.
Yeah, and you know what, Carter? It's something that just really doesn't get talked about enough, and I know we've harped on this before. But talk about it with your friends. If something's happening, I think it's better just to be open. I know me and you, well, we see and talk to each other every day. So if something's up, well, we'd probably notice. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to have those conversations and have those outlets. I think as guys, you tend not to chat about this stuff too often. But I think, talking with your friends and knowing that the support systems are there, having these conversations, just open those lines of communication. And, I always think back to, different things, different ways that mental health affects people. And I just had this conversation actually with an ex athlete of mine or a friend of mine, and who went through and they competed all their life, was a big time athlete. And then sports stopped, and that drive stopped, and they've realized that they had some problems that they had to work through, and they got the help they needed, thank God. But at the end of the day, I think they went out and talked about it. They made it a priority, and I think a lot of people don't make mental health a priority for themselves and getting the help and chatting about it. So I just hope that anybody listening, if you have friends, family, even yourself, just make sure you go out and you check on everybody, you talk about it. And I think, like I said, opening those lines of communication is huge.
Yeah, and it's okay to have mental health issues, but it's not okay not to address them and just to keep living throughout them. Communication and awareness are the biggest thing in these scenarios. Just want to make it more just the awareness and just let people know that it's okay to talk about whatever is going on in their lives. But we're going to leave it there. Thank you guys for watching. The likes, comments, support, everything has been appreciated. We'll be coming at you again with any Toronto Blue Jays free agency updates. Well, we're kind of leaning, I think a lot of Toronto Blue Jays media is sort of the same thing as last year. It's all or nothing for Juan Soto, except we do have a little bit of a backup plan. I think Max Fried might be a part of that. Again, Santander, Gleyber Torres, Alex Bregman, guys that we've talked about. There's multiple other guys that we can talk about and we'll continue to talk about on this podcast. But Braden, you got anything else to add before we head out for the weekend?
No, I appreciate you guys watching all week long. Hopefully you can tune back in and we'll have some good news on Juan Soto soon enough, at least if it's, or just news in general at this point, just an answer. What's going to happen? And we'll make sure we cover that here again. If you guys haven't already, make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube, check us out on all of the social medias we said. And please do, if you have any extra cash lying around, anything like that, go donate, even if it's $2, even if it's something, anything really does help. Thanks again for watching.
I got one more thing.
And
also with all the MLB coverage as well, Sully, Locked On MLB is covering all that as well. So free agency talks, who's in on which free agents, what teams are interested on who, a bunch of good information there. So check that out if you do have the opportunity. So thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you guys on Monday.